The strange thing about making art is the process is not as linear as it looks. Sometimes I'll have an idea for a work years before I start. And then when I eventually begin, other elements will come into play based on my feelings or experiences at the time. Things have a habit of accumulating, though, in the studio, and while meanings and ideas shift with the world around us, my hope is that the art has an ability to contain elements of the past and the present within it. Certainly the time I spend developing ideas and actually making something is also a key element. So an important part of the process is being open to the unexpected. One of the things I wanted to do by bringing a camera into the studio was to try and let you see sculpture in the round, which is obviously everything has a back. And the problem with digital media or even beautiful books is you only ever get to see one image. And I think what's exciting about sculpture is how it is in space. And actually I'm not too intimidated by the lack of access to galleries and internal spaces at the moment, because sculpture, as I've done a lot of in the past, exists very well outside, almost work best in the real world. These are charcoal drawings. These are still unfixed, actually, so you can see the black background is put on with charcoal. Not necessarily in that combination, but I've just got them up on the wall. I may work on them a bit later, may get the one on the right needs to be a little bit blacker, I think. And then here at the end of the studio is a painting that I've started really quite recently. Odd as it sounds, I do occasionally paint, and I've been interested in water and wanting to paint water, and have got a bit lost in the reflections in here. This is called Header. This is a maquette, a clay maquette, for something that I think could be much larger. I'd love to make this 3 or 4 meters tall if I ever found the right location for it. She needs to be on her own, and I like the idea of the viewer walking up to it and looking up, and she looks up to the sky, so there's this sense of her isolation, even though she could potentially be very large. These are probably the things I'm most involved with. So there's a clay figure here that I'm going to show you in a minute. These ones are both ceramic, recently finished. This one is either going to be called Sleeping Pilgrim or Sleeping Man. And I quite like the word cradle. I feel he's sort of being held by the earth. It was inspired by a very beautiful photograph taken by Markéta Laskakova of a man actually on a pilgrimage who was having a nap. And I've interposed myself into it to some extent. And as I say, I feel he's sort of being held by the ground that he's lying on. This is something I haven't done before, really, in clay, but obviously all the figures come from clay, so the idea that he's emerging from the base or sinking into it. And there's a connection in a way with these leaping figures are the kind of opposite. And I think there's an attempt to do something which I've avoided doing for a long time, which is to the non sequitur of trying to capture movement in clay, in sculpture. And I think there's a kind of youthfulness to these pieces. And this middle one, which I've walked past, is a younger person with a totally different context where she's sleeping or resting her little head on a frisbee. And I can't really explain it, but I just like the way that one fitted together. I'm still painting this one, and this is a completely solid piece of bronze weighted at the bottom. And as you can see, there's a slight amount of shrinkage that goes between. So this is the same sculpture. Ceramic one a few millimeters taller. And, as any artist, I suppose, that uses colour, I'm thinking about the shape of this, the colour of it, and what might work best with this particular piece. It's enough turning. This is a sketch I've been working on recently in little bit of charcoal, mostly Caran d'Ache crayons, which you can lick if you want to get a more painterly type colour. What I love about Caran d'Ache is you can literally, when the colour changes, I can just work in and just literally put down one like paint and pick up another, working from a photograph mostly, and starting to think about the proportions of the sculptures. Nothing I make is ever exactly life-size. I have a slight phobia of mimetic sculpture and painting. Something needs to change, hopefully, through the hand of the artist, and for me, scale has interesting kind of psychological qualities. Charcoal drawings that I've done, there are some behind me. Recently I'm doing these black backgrounds. Because I'm a sculptor, I'm always thinking about the figure in space, and something about dropping the background out really brings the figures out towards me, which I'm enjoying a lot, actually. These are just ceramic, actually, these pieces. The figure was built on the base and then cut off and fired. And then once it's fired, I pin it with a little metal pin, and there he is. I made some figures literally 30 years ago, balancing on one foot, and I was obviously a lot younger. And I'm interested, I suppose, this current body of work in terms of fitting this imaginary self and the real self. So this sleeping figure here, when you have these leaping figures next to this figure, you get that sense of the lived real life and then the internal life. And it's something I'm pushing forward into this piece here. I've been working on this for quite a long time, maybe, I don't know, on and off for 3 months. This is just clay sprayed with water. You see my little modelling tools here, so I'm putting the marks in, slowly building him. And then sometimes I have to cut limbs off, so that's so I can work on the inside of the hand. And then once it's been fired, I will pin it back together. It has an unexpected extra element. I haven't quite worked out what it's going to be doing, but he's going to have something on his chest, like that. And now that is very particular. I quite like the idea that you don't know if he's guarding him or about to attack him. but I don't know whether it's the lockdown or what we've been through. I have very vivid dreams, and often they're about clay and they're about colour and they're about scale. So scale alters and changes. And this is really a self-portrait. And when it's painted, he'll have some colour in his cheeks and on his clothing. His feet are crossed, and so it should become apparent that he's sleeping. It also plays on a piece that I made quite a long time ago called Lying Man, which had a younger version of me with an even younger alter ego on his chest. So this is a slightly older sculpture, although I've done a version where his feet are black, and this one actually I've painted his feet. It's called, it's got a rather cryptic title. It just has the letters of YDNHIF, I think, which it's You Don't Know How It Feels. And to be me, I think, is how the song goes. But it's that sense of an internal life, and it's a very compact figure. He's somebody I've gone back to and have sculpted again and again. And I don't want to say too much about it, but there's a sort of the sense of what's going on in his head, I suppose, is what's important to me, more than how it sort of manifests outside. There's a slightly bigger version just here. An older piece, but a monochrome, but actually I've painted some of these greys and whites that are in the paint. It's not all through light. And it's an interesting thing, obviously, painting sculpture. You've got that crazy situation. You see it on the fully painted ones the most. Do I paint the shadow in, or do I let it occur? And if the shadow's too strong, then actually I can put some white in there and make it flatter. So each piece is unique. I make additions, copies, but actually each time I paint them, they come out slightly differently. The newest and largest figures in the studio are this pair. They're called Standing Figure Man and Standing Figure Woman. They're both exactly the same height. They are 2.2 meters, 15-20% bigger than life size. And they are designed to stand opposite each other, not as close as they are now in the studio. I've shown them in Sweden. They were 8 meters apart. This pair are going to London. They're going to be 10 meters apart. Yeah, so I'm still painting them. So his jeans and jacket, waistcoat are probably finished. Everything is a little bit shiny because when I use a 2-pack marine paint, which can withstand the weather, build it up in layers, and then I put 4 or 5 layers of wax over the top to protect the paint. And it's actually nice this time of day, we're getting some interesting light kind of falling down his face. I've probably had 3 painting sessions on this already. So there's the primer coat, the undercoat, the beginning of the colours. And the paints go dry after a day. So I mix up little pots. I've got some here. You just sort of build it up. I can take things away if I don't like them. And it's very subjective, I suppose. It's just my own, what I feel about the figure. And it's hard to, this is why I'm a sculptor. It's difficult to put this stuff in words. But I like the idea that he's present within himself, slightly awkward, arm coming out maybe a bit from his body, kind of waiting, about to embark on something. I made him first, and then I, right from the outset, had this idea of having a female figure looking back at him. She actually needs a bit more work. The colour's not quite right. It's going to be a bit noisy. I'm just going to turn her so you can see the face. It's slightly crazy. They are 200 kilo bronze sculptures, not fixed to the floor. So I wouldn't be able to display them like this publicly, but in the studio it's safe enough. But if you come round, you can start to see some of the colour, some of the similar things that I'm doing with him. They're both based on real people. She is naturally quite tall, and I chose her partly because she's, I think, 6'1", and I wanted someone who was comfortable at this enlarged scale. It's interesting because each time you paint it, it obviously changes it, and then when you put the wax on, it changes it again. So I need some highlights in here and some more shadow in here, and then some cooler colours down through this area. And then when the wax is on, at the end, I can polish up the bridge of the nose or here, anywhere where I want it to catch the light. But they're clay. You can, it's important to me that you can see that they're handmade. I'm not trying to confuse anybody, and you can't anyway. I mean, it's a crazy notion, this idea of trying to copy life. So, obviously with clay, I even have this little tool here that has a curve on the inside. That's particularly useful because my fingers are too big if I'm wanting to get a shape onto the eye. Obviously the light now is very good to kind of work on this side of the sculpture. And then I will turn it around later if I wanted to work on the other side. But it's about the sort of decision making, and I'm really using the iPad as a guide more than anything else. If I'm doing the hand, I might literally just have my hand next to it. Obviously it gets quite fiddly inside. And then I'm going to have to use my watch. you'll be able to look at it now and go, oh, don't put it there, put it somewhere else. And I can go slightly crazy because you'll think, well, actually, I haven't got enough movement into this bit of the knee. And sometimes I'll wrap up the sculpture so I don't see the whole thing all at once, because my brain tends to jump from the nose to the knee to the toes, and you can go slightly crazy. At no point do I ever start smoothing the sculpture. It's all kind of an investigation of mark making. And it's strange, you know, I'll push along until a sort of, either I can't do anymore, or I'm never totally happy when I stop, but I do stop. And then it'll be fired and I'll forget about it for a while. And then I'll reassemble it and I'll have the fired clay version of this piece in front of me, which is I haven't got an example. Oh, it's this colour. Comes like that. So that looks totally strange, and then it'll be a question of getting colour into that, and as I said before, getting it dark and starting to lighten up various areas. And that's nice because new things start to happen when you introduce colour. And then I'll take a mould of it so that we can make a bronze copy. That is a royal we. That is, the foundry will make a bronze copy, which I'll check on, obviously, so I'll check on the wax and the metal. But I don't try and cast bronze. It's really a very complex process. The strange thing about this piece is how the kind of meaning has changed over time. So I think I began it in February, and obviously now, in the current climate, when I think about a sleeping figure, he seems more vulnerable, you know, and there's nothing I can do about that, particularly that idea of this weight on his chest, which I think when I began the piece was about dreams, but actually now has a more sinister sort of relationship to your lungs and to breathing. I don't want to overdo it. But it'll change again, you know, that's the nice thing about art, is that the object remains and the meanings shift through different periods in our lives, so that I might look back at something I made when I was much younger and feel entirely different about it.